Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest batch of listener questions. On this episode, we're debating vibes versus data. We're making a league of American-owned teams, and we're taking a trip to Como. It sounds lovely. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, your friend, my friend, the Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, the Ryan Bailey. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing wonderfully well. I'm still in Florida. I'm wearing a flamingo-themed shirt today, Taylor. I'm feeling very festive.
Very nice. What part of Florida are you in, Ryan, that makes you so festive?
The home of Inter Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
Not Tallahassee.
No. It's lovely here. I do like it here, actually. I think I could live here, Taylor. What do you think?
I think you're not alone in that sentiment. I think you might enjoy the luxuries that podcasting provides living in Miami and the prices therein.
Yes. All right, let's put the thinking cap back on for that one. Also joining us, a Florida lover, Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Have you driven up I-4 to the best bit of Florida yet?
Traffic.
No. So earlier this week, while I was here, Charlotte FC were playing in Orlando. I was like, oh, I'm going to Florida. I could go see Charlotte. Oh, it's 4 hours away.
Yeah, and that's not a good drive. I have driven that road before. Not fun. Probably my least favorite bit of Florida, but I'd still bite the bullet.
Also with us, Joe Lau. Are you enjoying this East Coast interstate chat, Joe?
Yeah, I think Taylor and I, the fastest way to get us disengaged is tennis, and the second fastest is Florida. Actually, those might be flipped. I'm not really sure. I don't have anything against Florida. I just have spent very little time there. On the subject of Inter Miami, Ryan, as long as you're in town, I think David might give you a call to play center back because they need a little bit of help. I've seen you play center back. You can do a job. You can put in a shift. You might want to keep your phone on.
Hey, they only conceded 3 goals last night. That's an improvement.
All right. Well,
we have
good.
fun. We have fun.
Maybe then I can afford the rents down here and keep podcasting down here. There we go. We've completed the circle. Thank you very much indeed, Joe. We're going to get to our listener questions very shortly. Before we do so, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you'll find our bonus content, bonus episodes of this here podcast, bonus video, and access to our Discord server. I've heard all the cool kids are hanging out there.
So I've heard that.
Yeah. Find out for yourself.
I can't think who has said that on every episode for the last 2 years. Do you know?
Me. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show if you'd like to support us, please, and a thank you. Let's get to our listener questions now, though, shall we? Nicholas Catano has been in touch with this one. If club teams have to play in leagues based on which country their owners come from, which country would have the best league? I would expect, says Nicholas, the US to rank highly with the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, and the 2 Milan teams. Taylor, what do we think of this one? I'm looking at the numbers here. You know, US-owned teams in the Premier League, there's 10 of them. There's 9 Serie A teams, presumably most, if not all, of MLS as well. It's going to be a big league, if anything, with the US teams.
With your 10, did you count West Ham in there? I wasn't sure how they qualify.
It's just majority. There's 10 majority owned by the
okay.
research I've seen. Is that correct?
All right, cool.
I think that's correct.
But yes, I had almost all of those same Premier League clubs, which is why I do give the edge to the U.S. By the edge, I mean I think it's the United States by a sizable margin.
Dominant. It's not even a question.
It's really not. Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa, Crystal Palace, Chelsea, Bournemouth, Fulham, Everton, and Everton now I think rising up the rankings a little bit for me, plus West Ham, allegedly, Milan, Roma, Fiorentina, Genoa, Parma, Venezia, Mallorca as well. You could throw them in there. So I'm going to say Americans have this one locked down. Hooray for capitalism.
Yeah, Marseille as well. Like they're a huge club. Frank McCourt owns them. Botafogo, who obviously won the Copa Lib last year, owned by John Textor. So yeah, the US dominate this. I think if you package the Gulf nations together, that might come close, but politically very difficult. If they can't negotiate the end of a trade embargo, I'm not entirely sure they want to have a league together. But for the sake of argument, you would have PSG, who are owned by Qatar, Man City, Abu Dhabi, Newcastle, Saudi Arabia. You'd have to mention Al Hilal and Al Ahly in the Saudi Pro League as well. But as I say, this is purely for the sake of argument because these are not from the same country. I'm just trying to make some kind of competition because it's clearly the US.
The only other ones that I had as potential nominees, I mean, you could say Spain because Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atleti, like right there, you've got 3 pretty strong teams. To name just a few, Germany has most of the Bundesliga: Bayern, Dortmund, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Freiburg. And then I realized Leverkusen are German-owned, as are Wolfsburg and Hoffenheim. They're just individually owned or corporate-owned. And then China, who have full or majority ownership of Wolves, West Brom, Birmingham, Espanyol. Not quite on the same level as some of those other ones we mentioned.
So I suppose, Joe, we've approached this as the most powerful or best teams leagues, but what's actually the best league? Is it necessarily the US one with all the big teams in it? I don't know.
I think it kind of has to be. I was tempted. Yeah. I really was tempted before I did the full deep dive to start with Germany, because Germany is the one that immediately I was thinking, literally every German club in the Bundesliga is actually a German club because of 50+1, which necessitates that members of a club hold 50% of the club plus one more vote. So
are you putting Leipzig on that list?
That's a really good question.
Right?
Leipzig they still are German owned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they Austrian owned? That's
well, Red Bull is Austrian, but yeah,
right.
I'm not sure what the structure is actually. I've lost track.
Yeah,
it's
tricky.
They're technically 50+1 compliant because they've just controlled who's allowed to vote, who the voting interests are, and that's how they've kind of skirted that one a little bit.
Yeah,
so you can throw them in.
Is it not like there are club employees, they're like, right, you're a fan, and they threw a scarf to them?
Yes.
That's the 50+1 satisfied there.
Yeah, nobody, even if we ban Leipzig, nobody's, we're not going to miss him too much in this. Because at the end of the day, Taylor's correct with what he said off the top. The United States ownership is the strongest. And it's a fascinating trend that really has exploded over the last, 10 years or so, and it's become even more prominent, it feels like, in recent years, of American owners looking for somewhere to sink hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Yeah. You go out and look, Sportico recently put out their list of the 50 most valuable soccer clubs in the world. And those valuations are calculated off of revenue, off of TV deals, off of stadiums, off of land, off of ticket sales, a bunch of different factors. 19 of the top 50 soccer clubs in the world, based off of Sportico's valuations, were MLS clubs. That follows the trend in general of American sports clubs across all different sports being valued incredibly highly. There is no risk of relegation. There is scarcity at its peak because it is a closed system across every major sports league in the United States. And ultimately, these are sports teams in so many respects are real estate plays, because if you can figure out how to get a stadium and to build infrastructure around it, that is where you can find a ton of revenue and a ton of real enterprise value over time. That's a value. And ultimately, a lot of people are priced out from owning MLS teams. A lot of people are priced out from owning American sports teams, regardless of the sport. So where do you go if you want to do something with all of your money when you're very, very rich? You go someplace where sports teams are cheaper. And when only 31 of the top 50 most valuable soccer clubs in the world, are European, or not from MLS, not from the United States, you're going to go out there and look to other levels of Europe, and you're going to go out there and look across the continent, and that is exactly what we've seen happen.
Yeah, looking at how many American-owned clubs there are in Europe really hit home just how big a change that has been in European soccer, like the influx of American owners over the last 10 years. It's not just the nationality, because I guess what's the difference between like a rich British owner who wants a plaything and a rich American owner who wants the same thing? It's about like the kind of American owner, because we're now seeing loads of private equity flowing into football. Clearlake Capital and Ted Boley, that's what they are. John Textor is in bed with an investment fund. Tom Wagner, who is the Birmingham City owner, is a hedge fund CEO. And these companies are in it purely to make money. And the American private equity landscape is stronger and more broader than any in the world. So that's like a fundamental change in soccer, where it used to, we've had rich owners for like decades and generations now, but these are different kinds of rich owners that are coming in from America. And you look at things like there is a real drive towards, we've seen it in the Premier League most acutely, towards match day experience. And it seems like every club in the Premier League at the moment is trying to redevelop their stadium. So they've got tunnel clubs and hospitality suites. And I'm not saying that's purely an American thing. It's largely to satisfy PSR as well. But you better believe that these private equity owners are driving these things too. And it feels like fans are protesting more against ticket prices. They feel like they're being priced out. So those things are linked. It feels like this is a fundamental shift in the sport that we're seeing.
There you go. So in this hypothetical, the best league would be the one with real estate plays and tunnel clubs. Cool.
What
Love
world?
it.
Welcome to the future, pal.
Or just Man City. That is essentially what they're doing right now. So, not American owned, I should say.
Oh dear, I hate this. Nicholas, thank you very much indeed for your question. Let's go to Elliot Barr now, who says, we hear a lot about Scottish teams going to England and how they might do there. But what if you took the big three in Portugal and imported them to Spain? How would they do? Graham, I presume when we're talking about the big three in Portugal, we're talking about Benfica, Sporting, and Porto.
I had Estoril, Vitória Guimarães,
Boa Vista, obviously.
Boa Vista, yeah.
Naturally, they are all in the conversation. But
dude's name in Portuguese club. All right.
What do we think, Graham? How would those big boys do if they went over to Spain? And is there ever a scenario where there's like an Iberian league where this kind of thing would happen?
This does crop up every so often, just like it does with the Old Firm moving to English football, which will probably never happen. There were reportedly talks over a Liga Iberica, as it was called, in 2019. Javier Tebas. It does sound very, very good, yeah. It's cured to perfection.
Right.
Javier Tebas as well, he has also teased some discussions in the past. That was after the Super League story, so that might have just been Tebas being Tebas. But I actually think this is more likely than the Old Firm joining the Premier League. Still seems like something that might never happen, but I think Benfica, Porto and Sporting, which are the big three, would fare quite well in the Liga. So Benfica and Sporting were both in the Champions League this season. Went through to the last 32. Sporting went out to Dortmund in the last 32. Benfica went out to Barca in the last 16. Porto don't really have a vintage team at the moment. They were in the Europa League this season. They are third in the table, quite some distance off the top two in Liga Portugal. Only finished 18th in that Europa League campaign that I was mentioning there. Went out to Roma in the last 32. But they still have Samu Agahawa, who's one of the best young strikers in Europe, was at Atleti previously, went to Porto after nearly going to Chelsea last summer. He's been excellent. Rodrigo Moura is someone that I've been watching more of over the last few weeks. I've written about him. He has exploded in 2025, looks the business. They've got Diogo Costa as well, who's a top goalkeeper, of course. So I place them, those three teams, roughly in the same category as the likes of Villarreal, Athletic Club, Real Betis, that kind of level, competing for a place in the top four behind Spain's big three, who are obviously untouchable. And the reason that I think that is we see those teams in Europe up against those standards of teams all the time, and they're generally quite competitive.
Yeah, Graham, I came to the exact same conclusion. I got at it from a slightly different way. So I wanted to go and look at Opta's club power rankings, which assign a value to each team on the planet, essentially, based off of various data machinations, and see where these three Portuguese teams would rate compared to La Liga teams, and got, again, exactly where you got. So the top two, Benfica and Sporting. So Benfica is currently rated by Opta as the 23rd best club in the world, which feels about right based off of the Champions League results that you gave there. They played Barca very close multiple times this year. They lost 5-4 to Barca in the earlier on in the Champions League. They played them two more times later on, as we talked about. They even beat Atleti in the phasing earlier on this year. So nice. I think there's some real merit to that. So they had Benfica as the 23rd best club in the world. They had Sporting as the 25th best club in the world. And those two, as a result of those ratings, they would finish, according to Opta, if all things were equal, they would finish in fourth and fifth in La Liga. So behind the big three, Barca, Real Madrid, Atleti, and ahead of those three other Spanish clubs that you just mentioned, Athletic Club, Villarreal, Betis. And then they had Porto as the 60th best club in the world. So certainly behind those other two, they had them finishing what would be ninth in this combined league if we were to actually smush them all together. But really, it would turn out to be seventh if you just put only them into La Liga. Obviously, there would be some other complexities here. As an American, I kind of have to laugh at the challenges of travel, but there'd be something about that. There would be changes here that would throw some wrinkles into the equation for some of these teams, but they would be competitive. I don't think there's any doubt about that when you look at the body of work that these teams have put up, both in the league, the talent that they consistently bring through as three of the best in the world at that, and their ability to compete in European competition. Yeah, you would have to feel pretty good about these teams certainly being well above the relegation line. In the case of a couple of them, really clawing for Champions League spots.
As we've just established from the last question, America now controls world soccer. You're welcome for that. And because Americans control world soccer, we know that branding is the most important thing these days. So for Graham and Joe, does Spain now have a big six, a big three, a big five? What are you going with then if we add these clubs in? Is it a big nine?
Big five? It's still kind of the big three. I think that's a little bit of the problem here is that the three Spanish giants would still be Spanish giants or the giants of this combined weird Frankenstein thing.
Iberian giants.
Yeah, we'll go with Iberian giant. It does sound good. I can't lie. I think it would be difficult to change that branding. Maybe you have the big three and then the Portuguese too, the rebel. I don't know. You gotta come up with something.
The slightly less big seven, I think.
Hey.
Benfica, Sporting, Porto, Betis, Sevilla, and Real Sociedad and Athletic Club. I think that's the slightly less big
catchy.
seven.
Yeah. Moderate seven.
Sounds like a Tarantino movie title reject.
Just everyone getting along kind of amicably, but without much conflict along the way. Yeah, that sounds like a good one.
Oh, you know how, remember in like the mid-2000s there would be like comedy remakes of films that had slightly different titles? That would be the comedy remake of The Hateful Eight.
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you
I
remember
do.
that genre of film?
Dumb and Dumber 2?
No, like it was like if it would be like a drama, it'd be like a comedy remake of a drama film. I can't think of any examples right now. I swear this was a genre film. If listeners in the Discord,
They go to another
scary
school.
movie?
Everybody, they go to another.
they go to another school. You don't know them. We met over the summer holiday, Joe.
Gotcha.
Oh, cute. Very cute. Graham, before we leave this question, can we approach the Scottish teams joining England debate and get your stance on that one, please?
Would happen if Celtic and Rangers had their way. I think what's slightly different here for the two equations between looking at a Liga Iberica and a British league is why the Premier League doesn't need Celtic and Rangers. Where there's an argument that La Liga could use Benfica, Sporting and Porto. They're trying to close the gap to the Premier League. I'm not saying this would do that, but it would help them having three clubs of that stature. The Premier League doesn't need to chase Celtic and Rangers. So for that reason, I think it'll never happen.
There you go. Maybe Barcelona could use it to actually get some of that TV money they gave away for the next 20 years if they got some more Portuguese teams in. I'm sure that if there's a will, there's a way. We will see.
This is another lever for them to pull.
Oh, another level. The Iberian lever system. We gotta love it. Elliot Barr, thank you very much indeed for your question. We take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about Antony's production. We're talking about biological data. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Clay W has been in touch and says, Antony's expected production per 90 hasn't really improved at all since he joined Betis. Has he actually gotten that much better since the switch? Or is he just getting lucky? Is La Liga easier, etc. and so on? What do we think? Joe, is it possible that Antony's now just at a club where the culture isn't complete trash and he's got an environment where he can thrive instead? Is it that? Maybe?
I like that with the analytics question, you went to Joe for the emotional take. Let's do it.
Well, I mean, you had to dump something on Taylor on the way to get to the analytics stuff.
Of course.
I don't have too much to say about Antony being in a place where he can thrive because I'm not really sure how much we're a fan of Antony these days for other reasons. I guess I'm not entirely sure where we left all that stuff. But as far as the actual production and the expected production, it
Quickly Googling over here. All right.
it is quite identical, really, for Manchester United Antony from this season and Betis Antony. He averaged 0.46 non-penalty expected goals plus expected assists per 90 at Man United. He's averaging that exact same 0.46 figure at Betis. The difference, he has actually scored 4 goals. He's got 2 assists. So he's finally finding the back of the net. This has been, for Antony, kind of a regression to the mean over the last several years. Going back to his time at Ajax, he was really hot and overperformed his underlying numbers. He scored more goals than he had expected goals. He had generated more goal contributions than he had expected goal contributions. At Manchester United, somewhat famously, he was super cold and did not have much of any production for them. And basically now across his last three stops, Ajax, Manchester United, and now Real Betis, he is almost exactly at his expected numbers. Like, his goals are almost right on his expected numbers, his expected assists. I mean, you combine these things together, it's eerie. He's got 31 goals and 25 assists across all of his career, and his expected numbers are right on there at 31 expected goals and 24 expected assists. Now, there's a missing 40 minutes from Sao Paulo in there, according to FBref, but we get the idea. This is not a surprise. Like, he was always sort of due for a little bit of a boost after how poor his Manchester United time has been. I put it down more to that than I do to all of a sudden he's in a place where the culture is so much better or whatever it is. He's a useful player in the right system. He is a skillful player. He can pick out a pass. He can dribble and beat you 1v1. That's been his thing for a long time. He is not, I don't think, as we've seen when he's moved out of the Eredivisie, he is not a game-changing talent. And he hasn't really been that for Real Betis, but he certainly has had a bigger impact there.
Joe, when someone aligns with their expected numbers like that, does that give you the fizz? Do you get excited like that? The system works!
I mean, yeah, but also no, because that's what happens for 99% of the people on the planet, right? Like, it only makes sense if you score. Let's say Taylor's out there playing soccer with all of us, and he scores 12 long-range bangers in a row. None of us have the expectation that that's going to continue forever, right? I mean, it's Taylor, so maybe it will. But nobody really thinks that he's going to do that 88 more times to get to 100 in a row. He's going to miss some, and that's just the reality. Or if you're having brutal finishing luck, if Taylor can't finish a tap-in inside the 6, and we know Taylor's a competent soccer player, that's likely to change. So none of this is a surprise. The system does work. It's been proven. That's why it exists, is smarter people than I have figured out these things, and Antony is just the latest example of it.
Joe, not to take us down a rocky pathway, were you alluding to the domestic abuse allegations?
Yeah,
where we are on him? Which is a fair thing to reference, and I think also does kind of connect to this question, because he's talked about their abuse allegations by his, I think, domestic partner in 2023 that are investigated by Sao Paulo police, ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. But he has talked about how that impacted his time at Manchester United. Certainly, I am not trying to make him the victim in that scenario, just trying to point out that I think there was a lot kind of hitting at once as he moves to Old Trafford, because it's a massive price tag, comes with that massive expectation and a feeling of like, okay, he's going to solve the wing now, and he has this existing connection to the manager, and it's all going to be perfect. And then it is the opposite of that. I think his confidence is hit. It's a different country. It's a different style of play. There is much more speed and physicality, I think, to the English game than he is maybe used to. And then those allegations happen, and I think it puts him into a situation in which he is pretty much bereft of confidence. And he's, again, talked about that as well, that moving to Betis, spotlight is off of him. There's much less of a, here is your price tag, you'd better justify it, and more of a, like, hey, we got this guy who could be really good. We're excited for you to be here. And I do think that level of enthusiasm and people not just sort of like waiting for him to make a mistake and then the whole crowd goes, oh, versus like, yeah, like I think that can pick you up a little bit. And I think you can see it in terms of his goal scoring rate and in terms of his goal contributions per 90, which has massively increased, at least if going from 0.22 to 0.65 is massively increasing. Joe, is that massively increasing?
See?
There we go. So like you are getting better attacking numbers from him at Betis. I think there are extenuating circumstances like the Spanish League maybe not being quite as physically intense as the Premier League, and maybe that's suiting his game a little bit more. You can do more spinnies before you get clattered, is I guess what I'm saying. So I think there's some intangibles and then some data to back it all up.
Yeah, that statistics, obviously loads of people collect different sort of numbers, and it's difficult to know what Clay's talking about specifically when he's saying like the expected production has remained the same. To be honest, when I tried to put a lot of the numbers on my research here, I found a lot of uptick in Antony, particularly in like his creative numbers, where his expected assists per 90 has risen. I went back to last season because obviously the sample size is so small for this season at Manchester United. But his expected assists per 90 has risen from 0.13 to 0.2. Expected goals on target has risen 0.28 to 0.36. Creating more chances, 1.8 last season compared to 2.53 per 90 this season. He has already created more big chances for Betis this season than anyone else. Now, they're a creative team. Isco plays for Real Betis. He signed in January. He's leading that column with 8 big chances for Betis this season. Now, I don't really have the underlying data to know if that's sustainable or not, but I have watched a load of Antony for Betis this season, and I would disagree with Joe on he hasn't been a difference maker for Betis. I think their fans would strongly disagree with that. They are like crowdfunding to keep him, which is funny, by the way. I think that's a little bit of a stunt. But they're like crowdfunding to keep him at Betis. They want him to stay beyond the end of the season. And one of the things that I found was he's having a lot more touches of the ball. Or not a lot more touches of the ball. He's having more touches of the ball. He's gone up. His touches per 90 have gone up from around 60 last season to Manchester United to 70, which isn't a huge increase. But I also think Betis, just having watched Betis a lot this season since he's joined them, they're playing into him in a different way. They're getting teammates closer to him. I think there was a misconception at Manchester United that he was a kind of Bukayo Saka type who you wanted to have isolate against an opposition defender because he's a dribbly boy, right? That was the misconception. He's not very fast, Antony, so he doesn't have that acceleration away in the same way that Saka does. And Betis have got players closer to him. He wants to work in tight spaces. He wants to cut inside. They're getting Isco over to him. They're getting Johnny Cardoso over to him. They're getting Hector Bellerin up on the right side to support him as well. It just feels like there's a lot more support around him where it's not all on Antony to create something out of nothing. And the ironic thing is, when you get that support around him, you embolden him to create something out of nothing, which is what he has done for Betis time and time again. I mean, some of the goals that he scored this season, and this is where I accept Joe's point of like, maybe this isn't sustainable, but some of the goals he scored have been ridiculous. He's got 3 goals in his last 3 games. That goal against Espanyol, which we talked about in the weekend review, was a goal of the season contender. He followed that up 3 days later or 4 days later by scoring a volley from outside the box against Fiorentina to send Betis to a European final after scoring in the first leg to put them ahead in that tie. So if that's not a difference maker, I don't really know what is, because you look at his goal contribution, he's got 13 in just 23 games, seven of them goals. I'll take away the assists, not to just so that I don't annoy Joe there, but like 7 goals, a lot of them have been match winners. It was a match winner against Espanyol, it was a match winner against Fiorentina in both legs. So yeah, I think we're seeing a confident Antony again, and if you can separate the art from the artist, if we're putting the other stuff to one side, like it's fun to watch a player like him again. So I kind of hope he does stay at Betis, because I don't know how much the environment stuff matters, but he's clearly he's been emboldened in a way that he wasn't at Manchester United.
Graham, you gave us a lot of very good numbers there, and I do have to believe that the current Rangers administration would stare at you angrily if you like passionately argued he went from 0.12 to 2. Like, how do you not see how big of a difference that is? With all of those numbers in place, Graham, what's the one that stands out to you the most? Like, what's the one that tells you this is a different player, a better player, a stronger, harder, better, faster, stronger player?
The chance creation. Because, I mean, the goals, you can say, well, that might just be him getting hot and having a hot hand and putting it in the top corner. Is that sustainable? But the chance creation, he is creating a big chance every 142 and a half minutes for Betis. He is creating a chance. He's third in the list for chances created this season behind Isco, and I forget who the other player is. But again, he joined in January. He's creating a chance, I think, every 20 minutes or something like that for Betis. For Man United this season, and look, it's a small sample size. I think he played 6 games for Manchester United this season, or 5 or 6 games for Manchester United. He didn't create a single big chance in any of those games. So the chance creation is what stands out for me most.
So based on those numbers, he's created a chance as we've been talking?
Yes, maybe.
There you go. Just every 20 minutes, like
that's
clockwork.
How it works.
Yep.
That's how it works. Yeah.
You got a little alarm on your phone, Graham, every time he does
there's
it.
another one.
Yeah, it's how I know to message Taylor in our Slack to annoy him of how well Antony's doing.
Oh, that's how.
Oh,
I had wondered.
So much collateral damage from Taylor Rockwell today. Apologies, Taylor.
Don't even try. You started it.
Man United started it?
Yeah,
I can't think of any other players.
a horse
who have gone
started
on
it.
to better
Graham and I
things.
established that in Soccer 101 this week. A horse started it.
Yeah, look at Graham wearing his Scott McTominay jersey just to rub it in even
I know.
further.
It arrived. It finally arrived, along with these chopped tomatoes. I don't thank Scott for sending those.
Wow, Graham had the prop ready and everything.
Wow.
Couldn't find a real tomato in the fridge, so these
Because
store-bought
Hey,
chopped tomatoes because Scotland. Yes,
That's. I think you just proved his point. That's amazing.
I don't know what to say to that. So, Clay, thank you very much for the question there. We're going to move on to Kenneth Siden's question. K-Side says, do players own the biological data that a club measures and tracks? When they transfer, do they get to take that historical data with them to the new club for red line information? Are clubs trying to get that data included in the purchase of players? Taylor, it's a very good question from Kenneth here, because obviously, you know, the medical is probably where you get a lot of data for, or certainly traditionally you would have done when the player joins a new team, but data is everything in this modern game, right? So how does it work in terms of the transfer of data and the ownership thereof?
I don't know. That's my answer. It's a really tricky one, right? Because like I think lest you have resources and contacts with clubs themselves, which maybe 1 or 2 people on this episode do, it might be hard to know, and it might be hard to know even if you do have that, because I don't know how much they want to divulge this information. So rather than consult an expert, I went with my gut, and my gut tells me that they probably don't let the players own it, that the club probably retains it, and they are probably hesitant to share it, especially American teams, because I think they want to limit liability, is my guess, and the medical industry over here is lovely. And so if you are a club that has data that could then be interpreted as, oh, you knew this guy was going to get hurt, you knew he was injury prone, and you sold him anyway, that opens you up to, if not liability and lawsuits, then at the very least there is skepticism about the kind of veracity of what you're saying when you are sort of considering selling a player or buying a player. And so I think clubs probably want to keep this somewhat close. It basically feels like a thing that players should easily have access to, but will it immediately run into a series of administrative obstacles when they actually try to get this data?
Graham, where did you land on this?
I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, this is you've pretty much nailed it, Taylor. This is a good question that I didn't really know the answer to. So I asked my mole at Hearts, who I've used before for questions like this. He told me that if the club collects the data, the club owns the data. So the player technically wouldn't have the freedom to use that data in a transfer. However, it is very common for players, apparently, to employ their own third-party data company to track them, not just for transfers, but throughout the season. So then when they make a move, they have that dossier of information to pass over. I saw when, I never know how to pronounce her name, but Lotte Wubben-Moy, who is a long-time defender for Arsenal, I saw recently that she signed a new contract for Arsenal, and what was notable about that was in her contract announcement, she thanked Analytics FC, who did the job of being her own data provider to then present the data to Arsenal on why they should give her a new deal. And I think that's relatively common, particularly the elite level of soccer. Yeah, it is genius. Unless the data comes back and shows them why they shouldn't give you a
you're
new
rubbish,
contract.
actually.
Well, that's the gamble.
But if you have your own data interpretation, right, then you can always... Maybe not always, not trying to incur the wrath of Joe Lowery, but I feel like you could make data be like, oh, no, you're this type of player who does this specific thing really, really well. And if they utilized you properly, then you would be winning every single game. Like, it makes a ton of sense. And also, you can then, determine the validity and veracity of their numbers and what they are reporting back at you instead of just sitting there and being like, oh, this data person is saying all these things that tell me that I'm worth $2 million less than I thought I was. But my person over here says, actually, I'm really good, so counterpoint. Like, it does kind of do some checks and balances, basically.
For the last question, Joe and I used the same data. He argued he was rubbish, and I argued he should win the Ballon d'Or. Like, so basically, you just fit it to whatever argument you're trying to make. But my Hearts guy was also saying that a lot of the time the relationship between clubs is quite amicable, and if they ask for some data during a medical, they will hand it over. And he says, particularly in Scotland, that's the case because there's a lot of collaboration between clubs on things like video footage. So I actually kind of wonder if MLS clubs, Taylor, might be quite willing to collaborate on that sense because they're obviously quite close. But maybe that wouldn't be the case if we're talking about like a €100 million player or something like that.
Like Antony.
We now know that Graham's mole at Hearts is a man. I've made it my mission to find this person and to become close with them and usurp Graham as the mole tapper. One clarifying point:
a big giant mole walking around the club offices would be the
mascot.
Yeah, it shouldn't be hard to find. I just haven't started yet. Okay. One point of clarification. That example that you're bringing up, Graham, about Analytics FC, who do some content stuff, they do some consulting stuff. I don't know that example intimately. I would imagine that example is more about on-field, in-game data.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So about some of the stats that we brought up for Antony as an example. I know for a fact that there have been MLS players that have done the exact same thing. They go out there and hire a small analytics firm, and they use that as a tool in their contract negotiations. I think Kenneth is asking about something very different, which is those GPS pods that players wear in training, right, and that they wear in the games that track things like high-speed runs and that track sprint speed and that track distance and all sorts of acceleration and deceleration stuff, which has become a real hot-button topic in sports science, not just in soccer, but in basketball and in pretty much every sport, right? That data has become really important to how clubs train. I've been around clubs that they take that stuff seriously, even lower level clubs. Every player's got a pod. That data is being collected after each and every training session. It's being input into a computer, and it's used to help coaches determine training plans that are even at times specialized for individual players. It's a really complex and deep process that goes down here. Now, that's, I think, the data that Kenneth is wondering about. Maybe I'm wrong. But as far as what happens with that data, as best I can tell, and we've gotten to some of that already, as best I can tell, it does depend on the specific league. So I found something for the NWSL. In their CBA that was agreed to back in 2022, players got ownership of that biometric data. So Megan Burke, who was the executive director of the NWSLPA, said at the time, quote, "In the CBA, we fought for the right for players to choose whether or not to wear the GPS tracking devices that monitor heart rate, distance covered, and things of that nature. So players can choose whether to wear that, and they own that data. That is their data." So my answer to Kenneth's question is, it depends. It really does depend. I found something similar with Major League Baseball, not Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, that reached an agreement, the MLBPA, with the MLB a few years ago that made it illegal for the league or any individual team to sell and or license that confidential information, the biometric data. I don't know, I didn't get the sense that meant the players owned it necessarily, but there was some sort of specialized agreement struck between the Players Association and the league itself. So I don't know the answer for every league, but I would imagine most of them are, in fact, owned by the teams. They keep that data, that's theirs. But clearly in special circumstances, and maybe in more than I think, maybe they're not so special, the players do have a say in what happens with that info.
That's a really interesting example, Joe. And it does kind of make you wonder whether, as this biological data becomes more important and more valuable, whether that's just going to be factored into collective bargaining agreements across the world, or even if it's something that FIFPro could somehow negotiate for players all around the world. It's like the player union. Just a quick clarification to the clarification. I asked my Hearts guy exactly the question that you just asked there, Joe, about. I've no idea about Analytics FC, but I asked him if the biological data would be available, would be collected by these third parties. And he referenced a company called Jamestown that apparently a lot of the players use and Hearts use as well. And apparently they've got some kind of system where they can map the pitch. Now, you wouldn't have like the heart rate stuff, the heart rate data, but when you're talking about like sprints and accelerations and stuff like that, they can map the pitch and come up with that data. So even if you're not getting that data from the club directly, if they're not handing it over, there might be ways for you to get some of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there is some sharing between clubs and players. Like I could see amicable relationships leading to that. It is an interesting question though at the end of the day of who owns that data, who gets to keep it, what happens with it, because there could be some sensitive stuff in there. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and I have the sense that we are at the just really the very early point of this becoming a bigger talking point.
Guys, I know you're all sitting down. I've done a journalism. I've just had a reply. I reached out to Clint Irwin of Minnesota United, who is part of the MLSPA, and he's responded. Would you like to hear what Clint said, Joe?
Go on.
Yes.
Yeah. So to Kenneth's question, he says the short answer is yes. The players do own the data, have access to it whenever they transfer or move on. The longer answer is it depends where the data resides. There are long negotiations on that still ongoing at the moment, but no doubt when the player generates the data, they own the data. In the future, and probably now, there's a big battle on who gets to monetize that data. Some of that's already happening. It's a fascinating area, says Clint. So there you go.
Signed, winning with elegance. Is that how
We're never going to let that die because it's so good.
It's fantastic, yeah. But I'm picturing a world now where a player transfers and they're leaving the locker room and like a big security guard goes, "So you need to hand over your sports bra, please." You can't leave without that. Sorry.
Your individual data server has to be returned promptly.
Yeah. Feels a bit Black Mirror, doesn't it? But there we go. So there's some nuanced answers to that question, Kenneth. I hope that gave you a suitable answer. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take one more quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Como and their successes this season. And we're talking vibes versus data. More data coming up. Woo! Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Austin Janicki's been in touch with this one and says, how has the season gone for the richest team in Italy, Como? Has their strategy of signing all the players that make you go, oh, hey, he's still playing, paid off? Or has Cesc Fabregas adapted their approach? I think, Graham, it's safe to say, well, currently, as we speak, it has paid off. Como are on a bit of a heater at the moment. I think they've won 6 in a row. They're the first promoted side in Serie A to have won 6 in a row since 1973, when Lazio last did that. Thank you very much, Opta. But basically, they've gone from being sort of circling the relegation spots from like the start to the middle of the season to they're 10th now. They're mid-table. They've done a very good job. Cesc has done a very good job. Whether we can say the older, oh, hey, he's still playing players have played a big role in that, I suppose, is another question.
Yeah, so I think Como's strategy has worked, although not necessarily in the way that Austin suggests. So it is certainly true that they signed a bunch of aging, forgotten stars, and some of them have contributed. Like, I don't want to get that twisted. Patrick Cutrone is their starting centre forward. Alberto Moreno has been their first choice left back. De Sena and Kempf are their first choice centre backs. You've also got Goldaniga in that unit as well. They are all over 30, and Pepe Reina, who is the quintessential, oh, that guy is still playing, who's 42, has had nearly 1,000 minutes in Serie A this season. So those players have played, but they have combined this with targeting some really top quality young players. So Assane Diao was signed from Betis in January. He has made an immediate impact. He's actually their top scorer in the league now with 8 goals, despite the fact he's only played half a season. He is this really exciting, goal-dangerous wide player who is already a Senegal international at 19. And the other smart thing Como did was they positioned themselves as a club that would play a modern possession game that'd be a good place for the best young players at the biggest clubs to then be loaned out to. So Nico Paz is the prime example here. I think his transfer is actually permanent, but Real Madrid have a really low buyback clause on him. So pretty much as soon as he went to Como and started playing games, there's been this discussion about whether he's going to go back to Real Madrid. That seems probable at some point in the future. But he's been brilliant as this number 10, as the creative heart of this team. The other one is Maximo Perron, who is a central midfielder on loan from Man City. I think they got him like a year ago from River Plate. I think City have had trouble getting his work permit, but he has had 1,700 minutes in Serie A this season. Alex Valle as well, who is this highly rated left-back from Barcelona, who was at Celtic, weirdly, for the first half of the season, surprisingly struggled here, is now at Como. So that part of their strategy has worked well. They've kind of combined the two ends of the spectrum by going for those aging players, but merging them with a lot of these highly rated youngsters.
Yeah, and it's worked really well because Como have had a very good season on the whole. You mentioned their recent success. They have been a super solid team across the entire season. They're not like, oh my, this is the best team in Serie A kind of good. But they're 10th in the league in terms of expected goal differential, and that's exactly where they sit in the table, is 10th. So they've been an entirely solid team. They do play this style that is attractive, I think, to players, where they're 6th in the league in possession, almost 55%. They are 8th in the league in non-penalty expected goals, so they are above average in terms of creating chances. They need to work on finding some higher quality shots with their possession, but they're a controlled, really well-balanced team that is pretty good at almost everything. Fabregas has really used a box midfield with a back four. It's tended to look either like a 4-2-2 at times, or even like a lopsided 4-2-3-1, where one winger pinches inside to become a secondary number 10 across from the actual nominal 10. And really, when you look at this season for them, where they arrive in Serie A, they outspent all but 5 clubs across the summer and winter transfer windows. Salary estimates have them at 11th in Serie A. They've spent a lot of money to do exactly what they've done. And the results have paid off, right? They've invested a ton of money into this team, salaries for some of the older players and transfer fees for some of the younger players. And it has worked out. They're a solidly mid-table Serie A team with ambitions to be something more. They're an attractive destination for people for a variety of different reasons. Yeah, I think this season has gone quite well for Como. If you gave them this outcome and gave them the choice before the season started, they would have taken this, I think, 99 times out of 100.
Taylor, your thoughts on Como this season? And also, maybe we should talk about what they do in the post-Fabregas world, right? Because it does seem like Cesc is going to get another club this summer.
Does it? I didn't know that.
I think so. He's been lined up for the likes of Roma, Leverkusen. Been discussions there as well. He's basically talked himself into another job from this really hot form he's had over the last few weeks, it seems.
Good on him. I think that will be a challenge for Como, more so than maintaining this form and kind of keeping it going next season, because I think he has been a key figure in, to go back to it again, like their branding a little bit, to have a young known player or a young manager who is a known player who is also kind of fashionable, played for some very good clubs. I think he reflects what they want their identity to be. So finding somebody who can kind of continue that will be fascinating to see if that's what they go for, or if they go for somebody who can play the kind of attractive style that maybe they aspire to and can continue to satisfy some of the veterans while also playing youngsters. Because I think, to Graham's point, that is a really smart thing they have done. The Nico Paz one especially, with how good he has been, how strong a performer he has been in so many different aspects of their season. I think that buyback clause is only 8 million euros. And
yeah, it's like nothing. And
Como paid 6 million for him. So I will be shocked if Madrid don't exercise that buyback option to then sell him this summer for a modest increase on that one. But even there, if you're a young player who maybe isn't getting time at Real or Barca or Atleti or Juve or wherever, you might look at Como and think hey, I could go there and get opportunities, and you never know what's going to kind of grow from there. So I think that they've had success on the pitch, certainly, but then in other aspects of their game as well, because even the veterans that Graham mentioned, you do have some of those names in there, but a lot of those names that are succeeding for them are late 20s, less so than the Rafael Varane type signing. And even the ones that are like getting the minutes, like Golden Liga and Kempf, who Graham mentioned, I wouldn't put those even in the category of like names that they kind of brought in to sell some tickets and generate some interest. Those are just kind of reliable performers who've been around for a while and bring you needed experience. So I think it's worked very well and been pretty successful overall. I mean, certainly a 6-game winning streak is a big part of that. If you asked me this question in January, February, I don't know if my answer would be quite as glowing. But here we are, and here they are, so glowing it is.
Yeah, and the strategy with the young players is it's like a self-perpetuating thing, right? Where they now have leverage to go to some of the biggest clubs this summer and say, look what we did for Nico Paz, look what we did for Maximo Perron, and get another couple highly rated young players for the start of next season. That does put a ceiling on what they can achieve. Like, are they ever going to be a top team? I don't know whether it's realistic for a club of Como's size to be that ambitious anyway, but are they ever going to win a Scudetto while having that reputation as a development club? But for the time being, it's working well for them.
It is indeed. Austin, thank you very much indeed for your question. One final one from this episode from John Adams, not that one, via our Discord. Where does each host fall on the vibes versus data spectrum? If 1 is watching soccer for storylines and feels, and 10 is crunching the underlying numbers to understand a game or a season or a player in depth, please assign yourself a numerical value on this spectrum and explain why you placed yourself there. Here's where I lean into my caricature. I think... So, Graham, I listened to an interview with Ian Darke recently on a podcast, and the way he described stats and the way that sort of commentators bring stats more into the game these days. The analogy he used was like the narrative of the game is the main course. It's the entree, but stats are the salt and pepper. They're the seasoning. They make it better. They bring flavour. They bring feel to it, but they're not the main story. And I kind of feel like that's a lot of the way I approach sport myself as well. So I think I'm more on the vibe spectrum because my interest in soccer is a lot about the storylines. It's about the emotion. It's about the emotiveness of it. And I think actually it's the way I would look at cars as well. I like cars. Like if I like a Ford Mustang, it's not because it's the best car in the world. It's because it elicits a certain emotion. It's got a look and feel. There's something about it. And I think I kind of approach sports in the same way. Like, as much as I appreciate the data and I appreciate the numbers and I know how they inform the game and they inform people's understanding of the game, for me, the meat and potatoes is vibes.
Yeah, that's the same for me.
Give a
as well.
number, you coward. Give a number.
Yeah,
you
what's your
coward.
number? It's 1, isn't it? After all that, it's
0.5.
1.
0.1 is 0.2. 0.12 to 2. There you go. To bring it back.
My kind of broad position is the data it should allow you to either support a story or tell a story rather than being the story itself, right?
Right.
And I think this maybe depends entirely on whether we're talking about professionally or just purely as a fan. Because I think professionally I'm probably right in the middle. As a fan, I'm like a 2, possibly a 3. But moreover towards the storylines, I like as professionally, I know I have a duty to try and use data and at least try. But I'm not very good at it, and I try my best. But like if that wasn't my job, I think my curiosity on the data side of things would be maybe mild and not much more. But then I was thinking about what are my favourite TV shows. Monday Night Football is my favourite football show. I think it's not that one, different one.
He likes the big robot.
The Gary Neville, I don't know what Gary Neville's theme tune is, but whatever his theme tune is, like a wrestler walking out. Yeah. Monday Night Football is a tremendous TV show, and I see John McKenzie, who works for Tifo and The Athletic, always posting about Monday Night Football and how good a show it is. And if anyone has watched Tifo's content, you know how good John McKenzie is with the data side of things and the tactical side of things. But that is my favourite TV show to watch. So maybe I'm doing myself a disservice. It's increasingly that show heavy on the data side of things, but it's the way that they present it is really interesting. But yeah, I am quite an emotional consumer of soccer at heart, I think. So I'll give myself a 2 or a 3 as a fan.
I thought your favourite TV show was Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah, that's just quality laughs and punchlines all the way through that you definitely don't need a laugh track to know when they're meant to be.
Data-led comedy. Wonderful stuff. Taylor, where do you sit on the spectrum?
I think a 4. But I'm not sure either one of these does a good job of like describing what I focus on, because I think I am definitely into the narrative aspect of things, which I think kind of pushes me into the vibes. But I also don't care about external narrative much at all. I don't really care about player returning to former club or player on the verge of scoring their 100th goal or whatever it might be. Like that stuff is never as appealing to me as the narrative flow of the game itself. So what is most fascinating to me, if a team is completely dominant in the first 20 minutes, why? How did they set up? What did they do? What did the other team not do? If the other team wrests back control somehow, how did they do that? What changed? What adjustments were made? When there's a goal that is perceived to be against the run of play, was it actually against the run of play, or had they attacked that side 4 different times and had success, and this 5th time is when they actually found a breakthrough? Like that, like why stuff happens and the kind of narrative back and forth of that is always much more fascinating to me than data or the kind of big talking points. When I host the show sometimes, I miss those talking points a lot of the time. Ryan is exceptionally good at blending that approach. I oftentimes will miss things that Joe or Graham have to be like, oh, and also it was like, you know, a really important win for Messi because of this and this and this and this. And I just kind of ignored that because why did they score a goal in the 60th minute is sort of the captivating thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor, I think I agree with so much of that for myself as well, which is why I think we've had so much fun doing, you know, U.S. shows together over the years. I think
fun for U.S. is maybe less so. We
struggled
but
moment,
enjoyed.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Some memorable shows along the way.
There we go.
I think I would define data differently than anybody else has defined it so far. And that's part of the reason why I'm going to give myself a 9. Also because I have to lean into the caricature. Like, I literally pushed up my glasses in the time that Antony's created a chance, right? So it happens quite often. I think data is not just like the numbers and facts and figures and ones and zeros. The data is also all the inputs that you're taking on while watching a game, right? It's what you just described, Taylor, of, oh, this team is finding success down the left side. This is you noticing things happening in the game and trying to watch a game analytically, which doesn't just mean numbers. It means analysis and in the thoughts that you're taking in inside your head. Data is a way to sort of codify some of that information that you're taking in. It's a way to get out of having to track every single pass and every single thing that happens in a soccer game because our brains can't do that in a 90-minute span. It's a shortcut. Data is a shortcut, and it should be used in pairing with what you're actually seeing. And so I like to imagine data as not just the numbers, but also how you're watching games and how what the information is that you're picking up, I should say, when you watch a game. So for that reason, I like to figure out why and how things are happening, which is pretty much exactly what Taylor just said. I like to see how teams are creating advantages for themselves and covering for their own weaknesses. That's how my brain works, and I think it also is what helps me add something to the soccer discourse a little bit. So again, if I was not doing this for work, I would probably think a little less hard about it because thinking hard is hard, and I would probably drop a little bit like Graham said he would drop. But I think it's a helpful way to think about soccer, and I think it's the way that like the architects of some of the most successful teams, you know, really do an exemplary job of. And I find those people really fascinating, like people that build rosters and people that go out there and make these decisions about how they want to run a team. I am not half as smart as any of those people, but I think those things are interesting. I think the way that they think about the game is too. So I would put myself, you know, way higher on this data side of this. But again, not using data as just cold hard numbers. Like my entrance into this job was tactical stuff and trying to break down with my eyes how things happen on the field. And I think ultimately I've learned that pairs and kind of has to pair with the numbers as well. But they go together, and it's not just about zeros and ones.
They do go together like peas and carrots, as Forrest Gump said. So on the Vibes data spectrum, we are from 0.12 to 9, Graham. So we've got a rich and compelling tapestry here on the Total Soccer Show.
Yeah, Ryan, do you feel as a Brit, this is a genuine question, by the way, do you feel as a Brit we're slightly disadvantaged in terms of, I just feel like in American soccer consumption, the mainstream is more in tune with like data analysis. There's more. It feels to me like there's more of a desire for that. Mm-hmm. And I think of when I was growing up, like I never got when I played football, competitive football until I was about 15 years old. I got like no tactical knowledge. Well, not that much of a flex, really. I felt like I got no tactical education from that. I feel like British coverage as well until fairly recently. As I said, Monday Night Football was this groundbreaking show that started like 10 years ago with data analysis. Until then, it was all very vibesy. It still is all very vibesy. And so that's kind of conditioned the way I consume soccer. And so I feel like it is probably true that British fans in general are not as sharp on this stuff as a lot of American fans are. That's just my experience.
Sorry to interject. I think my experience is very much not that. Like, I think I think they're probably relatively similar proportions. There are obviously more British soccer or more dedicated British soccer fans than there are like American soccer fans of American soccer. But I think about you're talking about Monday Night Football. You have an entire TV show that is like built around doing some of these things really, really well. Michael Cox is like one of the most prominent soccer writers on the planet. I mean, I think Doyle is probably our Michael Cox, and Doyle does a great job. There are so many American soccer fans on social media that will like just put laughy emojis in your comments if you're dropping any of these stats. Like,
Yeah.
I think it is very much the grass is greener on the other side.
Doyle is a great example, Joe, because if you're looking for like regular MLS coverage, I think it's like it's Doyle, it's Gas, it's yourself, it's Bogart, it's Ben Wright, like a lot of the backheel stuff. A lot of that is like very data-driven stuff, and I compare that to or tactical-driven stuff as well. I compare that to like a lot of the 10 Things We Learned columns. And look, I'm not firing shots at those columns because I've written many of them over my time and continue to do so. But I think of like what those columns are like for the Premier League. I think there's a huge difference in the way that that stuff is written. So
well, I think the crux of what you're getting to, Graham, is that US sports traditionally have been more data-driven than British.
Well,
ones,
that's
right?
it. Yeah,
so
totally.
there's more of an appetite for it here. And I think even if I have heard, like, say, The Guardian, I understand they have a podcast also, which is about soccer. And if you were to listen to that, they don't mention as much statistical stuff to tell the story I would suggest than we would, or an American podcast would. Because just, like, culturally, it's just a little bit different, but changing is probably
it's definitely changing. I just think proportionally, obviously, soccer, in terms of the sheer numbers, there's maybe more British data nerds than there's American soccer data nerds. But like proportionally, in the way that the coverage is, I don't know. It's just something that I've noticed, but I could be wrong.
There we go. I could be wrong is my mantra. There we go. And that is our listener questions episode. Thank you very much to everybody who has submitted a listener question. If you'd like to do so, totalsoccershow.com/questions, or you can join our Patreon, patreon.com/totalsoccershow, where you can join our Discord, hang out with all the cool kids, ask us a question, talk about Graham's shirts, whatever you want on there. Join our Discord, support us, please, and thank you. But for now, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your answering of listener questions.
Thank you very much indeed for your questioning of listener questions.
Joe Lowry, pleasure as always, my good sir.
I'm going to find that mole.
Yeah, you are. Thank you very much for your mole insight, Graham, and for silencing your Antony shot creation alarm during this broadcast.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Centipedes and millipedes. I'm just going to keep interrupting Graham. There you go, Joe.
I was going to say goodbye from me and my tin of tomato water here, but you do
Wow.
you, Taylor.
Wow. I like that we've introduced props into this audio medium all of a sudden this week. Thank you very much, listener. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye!